Okay, started recording. A bit late, but yeah, we just called it in the name of exclusivity for those that attended live. Okay, so this was the first thing I'm looking at, right? If you close the weekly below this, I think Tube is going to be a very easy short because this is incredibly weak. But be aware that we're shorting essentially all-time low, so you don't want to do it without extensive confirmation. That's why we're waiting for a weekly close. Because in general, all-time low is also just really cheap. Like you don't want to short cheap assets in general. So we need that confirmation. Now, some other things we can look at, and this is what I'm going to look at for possible longs and for TPs if we do get that short. And that's going to be this. We have a really nice shark over here. And we have a really nice ABCD over here as well. I can draw that too, but that's going to go way too low. So the shark is a lot more interesting. We have a really nice shark over here. And then a Nen star over here. These are the two I'm going to mark out. There are a bunch of others as well, but it's not worth drawing them out because it's going to be on almost the exact same level. So these are the other plays I would look at on Dupe. And I know this one looks ridiculously low. I don't think we get this either. This would be like essentially a moon target, right? Your short is essentially up until this target or up until this. The long I would look for is going to be something along these lines. Now, as I said though, and it's very important to keep those things in mind when I'm charting something like this, because I look at this chart and I am not all too bearish yet. And the reason I'm not too bearish and why I'm not keen to jump into a short is because the weekly hasn't closed yet. This is just an if. Like, if all of these things happen that we talked about, then we can start looking at this. I don't think price goes there necessarily. Because the way I trade in general is going to be, where do I think price isn't going to go? If it gets to this area, I don't think it's going to go below it. If we close the weekly below this level, I don't think it's going to go above it. So that's what we want to look for. I don't think we get this, but if we start seeing signs there, yeah, we should take short. So this is essentially what I'm looking at. This blue box will be the TP for the long as well, or for the short, and then that's why I would look for longs. I would also look for longs if we start closing like the weekly above, right, and we flip it back into support. We can start looking for longs then as well, but that is like really far off. That's going to be 2 weeks off, so we can talk about that next stream. Hype. Ooh, I gave a stream in a different server earlier this week, and this was the play I gave. Okay, so Hype, I'm going to go over this quickly because I already charted this. Essentially, the deal with Hype is this. Hype doesn't have a lot of harmonics. No matter where you start pulling harmonics from, the numbers you're going to get are really, really awkward. Because when you pull your XAB like this, you're going to get a 0.32. That is outside of tolerance. 0.382 is the minimum. When you start pulling like this, it's going to be even lower. The only actual proper bearish harmonic you can get, the only W shape you can get, ends over here. So that's why I have a line marked out there as well. However, if we go into a slightly lower time frame, we can say, okay, we can use this X point. When we use that X point, we get the shark. Now, it is very important when we look at the shark to know this is not like a 100% valid placement for X. It is not invalid per se, because there's a lot of volume in this little V over here. So it isn't necessarily invalid, but it's like kind of iffy, right? So we have to realize that when we approach this play. This is not a play I would ever set a limit for. You've probably seen it that I've been more keen on just setting limits for longs and shorts lately. This is not a play I would ever set a limit for because of that X point. This is a bit iffy, so we don't know if this is actually fully gonna hold. So this will be a very conditional play. This is going to be harder to execute. I would only take this short if you actually start seeing like very bearish closes. If you start seeing, for example, hammer candles like these, where you have your candle body right over here, very thin body with a high wick into the upside. Or if you start seeing a bunch of rejection candles. This is a nice Or well, I guess call shooting stars upside down, right? But candles like these, candles like this one. If we start seeing stuff like this, that is the only way I would actually take that short. Because candles like those indicate a proper rejection. Now, that is why I haven't even given this as a signal yet, because this is very conditional. I don't want to give this as a signal unless it's going to be a market order, right? Because I'm probably just going to give this as, hey, I'm going to enter this now, because this one is going to be more difficult to execute. Now, this is what I'm looking for. I am probably going to take a final TP if we get there, but I don't know yet. Maybe if we take a short, we can just use that as a hedge instead of TPing on our spot position, right? But we'll see that when we get there, because we are still in this spot position. Well, I have to move this. But we'll see that when we get there. So, in general, this is what I'm looking for, but I am not too sure on the short on hype. I am more interested in longs if we ever get down here. This little red line that you see is tied to this really big ABCD, this one. If we take the length from this, wait, let me put it onto higher time frame. If we take the length from this price leg and put it right over that C down there, essentially the lows we just came off of, what you will see is that it ends right on that line. Now, that is what we call an ABCD or a lightning pattern, and that is what I'm looking to bid. Usually you would look for shorts on these, right? As you can see, we did show a pretty good reaction, but then hype is obviously really strong, so it instantly went up higher. So if you get back there, really, really similar to what we drew on BTC at the start, this is going to be the area where I'm looking for longs. Now, do we get there? I don't know. If we get there, I think this is going to be a great area to look for longs. So, for that reason, this is essentially what I would be looking for. I'm just going to long the actual line we put down. I'm going to put stops right below the wicks over here. This is going to be our like major TP, where we have to decide if we're going to fully close the position or if we want to keep it open. And then I would usually just take it up to the highs or even up until that higher star modeling that we just drew earlier. So that is what I'm looking for on hype. I am looking for shorts if we show very clear signs of a rejection here. And I am looking for longs on a retest. Okay, XRP. Ooh, we didn't go as well as I wanted. That is very sad. We wanted to bid range lows. I don't want to mess with this short. I want to keep it intact. Okay, let's have a look at this. A bit sad voice. Yeah, you took a long break, right? It's good to have you back, Fajari. That was great. Okay, let me look at this. Okay, so there are a few things I see. First of all, I think this chart currently to approach for longs is going to be really difficult. Essentially, what you want to be doing is you will see that in this area, there are so many wicks into it that closed, what's it called, that closed above. That is going to be just your very obvious range lows. Just like you see over here, what we planned to bid was essentially just range lows. Essentially just this area, but we never pulled that far back. So instead, what I would look for is, can we get into a long on a level flip anywhere? So I want to draw some resistance levels, and then we're going to try and see if we can flip those to support, look for longs on those. When the market starts moving like this, in general, positions are going to be a lot more difficult to execute, because it's a lot easier to bid support than it is to bid a support resistance flip. So let's at least get started on that. There are a few things we can see here. First of all, okay, I'll get this out of the way. First of all, I want to draw the more high time frame ones. That is going to be slightly too high. And the reason why I want to draw the high time frame ones is because I think they make great targets. We have something to aim for, right? So if we draw this, our XIB is going to be 0.618, really nice one. This is going to lead to so many different harmonics. So I'm just going to stick to the formal ones. Let me draw those out first. Going to do X to A, going to do X to C, B to C, and then a trend base fit from A to B to C. And what you will see is there's going to be a bunch of different areas where all of these fibs align on almost the exact same spot, right? Where you get these really nice clusters. These are essential harmonics. Where you get to that point where, you know, formal patterns and informal patterns, and, you know, most of the patterns, you will notice that there are so many harmonics everywhere. This is usually how I discern them. So this is going to be a very nice shark. There's a really nice cipher over here. This shark, though, this is what I'm mainly looking at. This is going to be my main target. So let me make this a shark as well and put them into a little group. Shark. And then hide this one. This is what we're going to be looking for. We have an area to aim at. We know what kind of risk to reward we can expect from the longs. So let's look for that. Now, there are a few ways to approach an entry on this. First of all, that long that you saw earlier would still be valid. I don't think it's going to hit. I think it is very unlikely, but it would still be valid. So I am going to put it on the chart. And that is going to be right over here. I'm going to speed it up a little and only draw the outer edges. Yeah, it's going to be very close together. So essentially this is the area we're going to be looking for. This is the, where is the anti-crab? This is the first area where I would look for a long. I don't think this is likely to hit. If it does hit, it's going to be great. We can look for longs here. It's a great area to look for an entry. Very unlikely though. So I just put it there and we'll leave it at that. Now, what I think is more interesting is let's look at some old levels. So if we, for example, kind of zoom into this area, right? We have, wait, let me hide this so it doesn't become a spider web. We have, on this area it looks kind of iffy, right? But we did have a very nice guard here. And this guard here, especially the deep body part, is how I would explain the reason why we found support and resistance here so many times. So as you can see, that deep guard here acted as resistance. We broke out of it, flipped it to support, came back, used it as support, resistance, and we broke out of it again. So what if we just look for the exact same thing again? We look for a bit back into this and we're going to use it as support. So I want to draw it out exactly, and this is one I do think is very likely to happen. So I'm going to spend a bit more time on this and draw it out manually. So we're going to draw X to A, B to C, and then A, B, C. And what you will see is that we have a very nice deep guardy right over here. This is essentially what we're currently using as support and resistance. Every guardy / deep guardy also forms a crab. So we also have a harmonic higher up that we need to mark. Same reason I explained earlier, right? Even though you're looking for longs, you do want to mark out the resistance levels because you don't want to be longing too close to them. So there we have it. We have the deep guardy that we're currently broke out of, that we're currently looking to flip back into support. We haven't confirmed that flip yet. And we have a target to both look for possible head shorts or to look for more longs on a breakout or to look for TPs. So that is the second place I would look at, and I think this is a way more important place to look at because I think it's way more likely to play out. I'm going to make it a very simple play. We're just going to enter at the top of that deep guardy box. Stops right below that little consolidation area over there, and we're going to target the grab. 3.6 risk reward. If we do feel like price is really strong, we can even take it up to that point. Well, I like it more. 618 risk reward. Nice number. Okay. But in general, this would be, in reality, right? I could put this on a screenshot. I could also do this. In reality, this is the same play. And the reason why I say that is, let's say we're looking for this, but price gets here and is showing us very clear signs of rejection. We're going to close anyway. Even though we might mark this on the play, this is such an important area. If we're going to reject it, well, we're probably going to reject it. So we should keep that in mind. So this is essentially what I would look at for XRP. I do like this in general. I think this is going to be a very good play. All right, let me get something to drink real quick. If you have any questions, by the way, you can just put them in chat. It's gonna be easy for me to read because then I have some time to drink as well. All right. Okay, so now let's have a look at Sol. Sol actually looks very similar. I know it looks really different from XRP, but it does look quite similar. From our harmonic point of view, because we're going to get into the same patterns. So I'm going to draw almost the exact same pattern here that we just drew. I'm going to draw X to A, I'm going to draw X to C, B to C, and A, B, C. And we're going to see some very similar things, right? This is very similar to what we just saw on XRP. However, I want to add one thing to this. I'm not going to go into the details of this pattern because it sucks to trade and I don't want to go into details. It's really complicated. But this is an informal pattern. I think my name is the Seahorse, and I haven't traded Seahorse in a really long time, so I'm not 100% sure about the ratios. Either way, it's Seahorse for 0.5. Okay, whatever. What you can see here is something that I like to use this way of drawing PRZs for. When we draw harmonics, we usually look for clusters at the D point. For example, if you look slightly higher up at that 1.13, you'll see, hey, there are two fibs there, and there's a trend-based fib there. That is my harmonic, and that in this case is a shark. Now, something else you might see is, hey, even though we only have a shark of way higher, I can see a very confluent cluster over here. We have a trend-based fib 1618, we have a regular 0.618, we have a 707 and a 113. There are a lot of fibs in this area. There's a lot to look out for here, which makes sense when you look at price action. Because keep in mind, all of these fibs are drawn from this point on, right? It makes sense because now when you look at that cluster, hey, that is what we use for resistance. So we're going to get into almost the exact same play as on BTC here. If we do get back and we flip that to support now, we get a very easy long. We're going to look for the same, almost the exact same long. It's going to be people for this reward, not the greatest, but it's fine. And essentially that's it. That is what I would look at for Sol. Very simple one. Same trigger condition as BTC though. It is not allowed to close the daily below this. If this candle closes the daily below this wick, that is very, very bearish. So in that case, the play is entirely cancelled. So essentially, this is what I would look for. I think Sol looks good. That's a really nice play actually. We got it pretty fast. I would also look for shorts if you get onto that short, right? But same story as with the others. Most charts are going to look very similar, right? So same story as with the others. If we do get there, I would look for shorts for hedges, but I would likely do that on BT anyway instead of an altcoin. It's like the same story as with the others. ETH. When was the last time we've seen ETH up 14% in a day? What a day to be alive. ETH is okay. First of all, I'm gonna get this out of the way because this looks very, very similar to the other charts. So we're gonna get this out of the way, and then I'll do some more interesting stuff on ETH because this is gonna end up very simple. ETH is doing the same thing that the other coins were doing. When you look at this chart, essentially what we had is we had a very nice ABCD pattern right over here. I'm gonna mark this one out real quick. This is what we shorted. We got some nice profit out of it, and then got close to break even. The very, very obvious long that I am gonna be looking for, because trading doesn't always have to be hard, right? It's just gonna be this one. This is gonna be the main long I'm looking for. So let's get that out of the way, right? I think this is gonna be very interesting long, at least to this high, potentially even up to this high. I usually, when you have an obvious high like that, I'll put it onto the wick to the left of it. But first thing first, this is what I would look for. Very obvious one. Exactly the same thing, so we just talked about 100 times. So I'll put this in chat. That is chart number 1. Now, to make things a bit more interesting, let's look at this part of ETH. When we usually look at harmonics, there are two things we can look at when you have these kind of extreme wicks. The first one is this. That logic that we use a lot, where we have one price leg up, and then we just drag it over this one, and you get a new level. That is entirely applicable. That is entirely applicable and something I would absolutely use here. That is the first thing we're going to look at. So what I'm going to do is I am going to use the ABCD tool, and I'm just going to quickly put, I think this is going to end up somewhere over there. I'm going to use the trend-based fib extension tool, because this is how trend-based fib extensions are calculated. The one level is, that's nice. The one level is essentially where both sides have the same length, right? Where you take that length of A to B and then put it over C. That is how trend-based fib extensions are calculated. That's why the one level is so important on those. So, as for targets for ETH, I think this is a very, very nice target if we do get there. It is essentially just two fibs. It is this fib, like the trend-based fib we just pulled, and then on a regular fib, it is going to be the 707 right over there. So this is the first main area I would look at a rejection on ETH. Now, it is not often that we get to talk about areas for rejection on ETH, because usually it just goes down. But this would be a very nice area to look for. Now, when we look at that, this is obviously a pretty high target. We aren't there yet. I don't know if this is going to get there. If it does get there, I will tell you in advance, this is a great place to take some profits on ETH. Especially when you look at ETH like this, right? And obviously this is a very, very good weekly close, which is why we're seeing this bounce, right? However, this, no matter how you look at it, is a market structure shift to the downside. The damage to the ETH chart has been done. Almost every major asset that you look at will be in an uptrend. ETH is not one of them. The damage has been done. We have closed multiple weekly candles below our market structure low. ETH is now downtrending. So this, in my opinion, will be a really, really, really good spot to short if we get there. I don't know if we get there, but if we do, this is likely going to be a good area to look for shorts. And the reason why I would want to put an emphasis on that is because it's probably going to be really hard to sell your ETH or to get into shorts once price actually does start getting there again. That is one of those moments where people start getting into euphoria again, which is what you saw like over in this area again, right? Everyone is just shit-talking ETH over here and shit-talking the ETF. We get over here, everyone is really euphoric on ETH again. You can even see it if you go back into all of the analyst channels, right? Anyone that shorted ETH in this area, me included, is going to have really little reactions on the post. You would literally get like 20 reactions on every long, and then shorts over in this area have like 5. So I want to put an emphasis on that up front. If ETH gets there, if this is the start of one of those rallies, right, and ETH actually gets into this area, set alerts for this and at least take some profits, or at least consider it, because this is going to be a good area to look for that. Now, the second thing we can look for is longs or shorts if we get back into this area. ETH, and you might have heard other analysts say this probably, because obviously I'm the harmonic trader and not the SR trader, but this is like kind of an SR level. we can consider ETH as a range if we want to. It is very realistic to assume that this is just a range on ETH. And the reason why I say that is because, wait, let me change the color on these. Can I use this one? Yeah. And the reason why I say that is this. Usually, you don't see, on such a high time frame, you don't see these kind of equal highs, right? And this is not an equal high in the sense that most people see equal highs because this did get rated. This was an SFP. But when you look at this, it is very uncommon to see these types of equal highs on a very high time frame. Especially accompanied by these kind of equal lows. This is just a very, very high time frame range. That is what this looks like. So the alternative on a very high time frame would be, what if this is just a deviation? Which is always a possibility, right? Same we just talked about on Jube. ETH is not in a scenario where this is all-time low, luckily. But what if this is just a deviation? So I would look at this in a very similar manner. I would just look at Jube, just a bit less extreme. If we start, what's it called? Tapping into this area, closing below, I will likely assume that we're going to go a lot lower. If we start going up, flipping this to support, I'm going to assume we're going to go a lot higher. That is the other way to look at ETH. That is the way I currently look at ETH. The actual play, right? We already have that in chat. That is all I'm looking at. As for what I think ETH is going to do, I think this is what we should be looking at. If you zoom out, and if you just go into like a 3-day, 2-week, ETH looks like a range. This really, really looks like a range, but just looks like a deviation. And if this is actually a deviation, you're going to have some really good buying opportunities if you do flip this into support. And before you think, hey, if that is the case, I'm just going to buy it down here because ETH is cheaper now. I want to say this. In the end, and that is the reason why I'm not like currently buying ETH, right? I did buy ETH when I got a bunch lower, but I don't like signaling that type of long-term plays. But the reason why I'm not signaling to like buy ETH right now is this. If you're looking at areas like these, right? What is our invalidation? Because we are extremely close to resistance, and the only real way for this thesis to be valid is if we start flipping this to support. Currently, if we would have to place a stop loss on spot, that would literally be on this wick. So that would be a 30% loss. Now, if we would wait right now, and we wait until this area is flipped into support, right, we might get like a 10% higher entry. However, our invalidation, instead of that 30% drop, is going to be losing this level. That is a 5% drop. The reason why I do want to give this idea, but I don't want to give it as a current spot play, is this. You want to be preserving capital at all times, right? If you are wrong, you're wrong. That happens. It's the markets. No one is going to be right every single time. Now, if you are wrong, make sure it doesn't hurt you. A 30% loss, even if it's well managed, right? Even if you have proper risk management, is still gonna make a dent in your portfolio. For example, I would use 10% of my trading spot portfolio for ETH, right? That would still be 3% of my spot portfolio. I don't like doing that. 5%, that doesn't matter. Even if I'm wrong, that is going to be like minus 5%. That is just a part of the game. That is just a part of trading. So even though I think ETH looks really good, and honestly, I do think that ETH is going to go a lot higher. I don't know how high it's going to go, but I do think it's going to go higher. I don't recommend buying right now. Unless it's like very light, right? If you're going to just start a position, sure. If you know how to manage your risk, if you know how to manage trades like that, sure, you can do that. But in general, I think the actual proper, like safe buying opportunity is going to be over here. And if we get there, I think this is going to be a very, very good place to buy a lot of ETH. So, I would only take this as a spot play, personally. If we get there, I'm going to zoom in onto a lower time frame and then take it as a leverage play, which time frame aligned, right? Let's go on to like a 4 hour or 1 hour and just get an entry there and ride it up until the higher time frame targets. But in general, this will be the second thing I'm looking for. Or the short, right? this is still on the table. I don't think it's likely. I think ETH is likely to break back into the range here, but it could happen. You never know. So that is the second way I would look at ETH. All right. Those are all of the tickers I wanted to go through. Then before we end the stream, are there any other questions? And if not, then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go end the recording here. I want to thank everyone for coming, first of all. And it is nice that the voice chat does work properly, because the Sage clearly doesn't. I don't know when they're gonna fix that. It's ridiculous. Like, it really is. Yeah, I'm gonna end the recording here, and I will see everyone again next week. Thanks everyone for coming, and enjoy the rest of your week.